Hi, good morning. I'm Tom Conkle, a cybersecurity engineer with Optic Cyber Solutions, and today I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the newly released NIST 800-171 Rev3 and what we can see in the update. Before we get started, I just wanted to provide a quick reminder on SP 800-171. This is a publication for protecting controlled unclassified information in non-federal systems and organizations. SP 171 defines the minimum requirements for protecting the confidentiality of controlled unclassified information, or CUI. It was originally created to help organizations outside of the federal government understand what they needed to do to implement and protect appropriate protections to safeguard CUI from unauthorized disclosure. At its simplest, this latest revision, Revision 3, takes into account updates to changes to technologies, establishes alignment with NIST SP 853 Rev5, and addresses feedback from industry. In releasing the update to SP 800-171, we're excited to see that NIST also released the update to 171 Alpha. This is a companion document to 800-171 and provides guidance on how to assess the security requirements. Revision 3 represents the first significant update to SP 800-171 since its initial release in December of 2016. There have been several interim updates prior to Revision 3, including the release of Revision 2 in February of 2020. However, the previous updates didn't significantly change the content of the requirements. But as we'll see in the next few slides, there are several big changes in this latest update. Before we go into the specific changes to Revision 3, I wanted to pause and acknowledge the DoD's deviation memo. This memo was issued in May of 2024 and allows the Defense Industrial Base, or the DIB, to remain on SP 800-171 Rev2 indefinitely. Therefore, DIB contractors are not expected to implement Revision 3 to meet DFARS or CMMC requirements at this time. However, the DoD is likely to move to Revision 3 in the future, so understanding what's on the horizon is still a good thing. So let's continue on with what changed. Before we discuss what changed, I just wanted to provide a quick reminder of the 14 families that resided or were present in 800-171 Rev2, and we see those here on this slide. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the update. As we begin digging into SP 800-171 Rev3, we'll notice that we've gone from those 14 families from the previous slide to 17. These additional families include planning, system and services acquisition, and supply chain risk management. The planning family addresses areas such as developing and maintaining a rules of behavior and now includes a requirement to maintain a system security and privacy plan. This is one of the only requirement that actually moved from Rev2 to Rev3. So we'll see that the requirement for an SSP no longer exists or resides within the security assessment family, but now is part of the planning family. Okay. In addition to the planning family, we have the system and services acquisition family to address topics such as the security privacy engineering principles requiring organizations to follow defined engineering principles for developing and modifying system. It also includes ensuring unsupported system components are replaced and external system services providers comply with identified security requirements. The supply chain risk management family includes topics for managing tools, services, and vendors within the supply chain. As we continue to look closer, another thing that we'll notice is the number of security requirements in Revision 3 was reduced from 110 to 97. So while the number of families increased by 3, the number of requirements dropped by 13. While the number of security requirements included in Revision 3 decreased, NIST was still able to add 19 new requirements across 10 families. These requirements include things like maintaining system component inventories and developing and implementing incident response plans, as well as risk response activities. Additionally, NIST did remove 33 requirements, have listed 18 as unchanged, and identified 46 as significant changes, and there were 14 minor changes within Revision 3. Of note, in the supplemental guidance that NIST provided, they state that 15 requirements included minor changes. However, on deeper look at that, you can see that one of the requirements they identified as a minor change was actually withdrawn and is included within the 33 withdrawn requirements as well. So as we take a look into the 19 new requirements that were brand new to revision 3, I wanted to highlight a couple points. First of which is requirement 03.06.05 for incident response plans and 03.11.04 for risk response. These two additions were actually new in the final version of 171 Rev3 and were not included in the initial public drafts, but added after receiving public comment. So those are the two most new requirements, if you will. The other ones have been there since we saw the draft versions of 171 that NIST was proposing. And so from here we can see that there are 3 new requirements in configuration management, 2 in physical protections, and then when we get into the 3 new families for planning, system and services acquisition, and security supply chain risk management, we'll notice that there are 8 new requirements to align to those new families. And as I previously stated, 800 Rev 171 Rev 3 removed 33 requirements from Rev 2. However, if you dig a little bit deeper into that, you realize of the 33 that were removed, 22 of them were actually just realigned and incorporated into other requirements. So that the capabilities that need to be implemented to address these requirements that you see here that have been removed technically still need to be done. They still need to be implemented by organizations seeking to achieve the requirements from 171 Rev 3. They'll just do it in other security requirements than the ones that were listed in Rev 2. So in addition to the 22 requirements that were removed from Rev 2 and realigned to other requirements in Rev 3, we can see here that there are 11 Rev 2 requirements that were handled in other ways via other mechanisms. And the first of which you'll see is the grouping of the first 5 requirements here. And these requirements were removed from revision 3 of 800-171 simply because NIST deemed that the capabilities were already included in other requirements. And the new tailoring criteria for ORC, which basically means that the requirement was pretty much already being implemented in other requirements and therefore was seen as being duplicative by including them. So again, this is another area where within these 5 ORC labeled requirements, that the capabilities that we needed to implement in Rev 2 to address them still need to be in place in Rev 3. We're just going to track those capabilities to different requirements in Rev 3. The next group here that we see for identification and authentication, those 3 requirements were simply removed from Rev 3 because they've already been consolidated in 853. So when the new security controls in 853 Rev 5 were pulled into Rev 3, we had already addressed those 3 requirements there. And then the next 2 for maintenance and system and communication protections, these ones NIST basically changed their mind and said that these requirements weren't directly responsible for protecting the confidentiality of CUI. So the first one there for maintenance, 371, that one was just perform maintenance on organizational systems. And again, so NIST says that yes, maintaining organizational systems will help with the confidentiality of the system, but it's not a direct relationship to the confidentiality of it, and therefore it was removed. And then the 3.13.2 was to employ architectural design, software development techniques, and system engineering principles that promote effective information security within organizational systems. And again, this was deemed as an NCO, and honestly, we'll see those capabilities actually addressed in other areas of Rev 3. So again, this is another example of still good things. We're still going to do maintenance on our systems, but it's not directly going to be required from within Rev 3. And then the very last requirement here that was actually removed from 800-171 Rev 3 was 3.13.14. And this is the control that specifically dealt with VoIP technologies. And it was removed because it was the only control that called out a technology specifically And again, we're not saying that VoIP capabilities don't need to be protected. We're saying that all of the requirements within 853 need to be allocated to all system components, including the VoIP technologies, and therefore there's no need to call it out specifically. In addition to changing the requirements in Revision 3, NIST also changed the guidance provided for each requirement. Originally in Revision 2, we had a requirement ID, the requirement text, and some additional information or discussion text for each requirement to help us understand how to implement the requirement. In Revision 3, NIST has expanded the information that is provided for each requirement. We still get the requirement ID, the requirement text, and additional information in the form of the discussion text. But we also get additional references that help us map directly back to 853 security control that yielded the requirements inclusion in 171 Rev3. And we also get supporting guidance. Supporting guidance is basically just other NIST documentation, publications that will help give us ideas or help us to understand how to implement and meet the capabilities described by the requirement. Another big change in Revision 3 is the inclusion of organization-defined parameters, or ODPs. As you can see here, ODPs, or organizational defined parameters, are simply areas where NIST is allowing organizations responsible for protecting CUI to define specific criteria on how they want to implement the requirement. We'll discuss the organizational defined parameters a little bit more on the next slide. As we can see here, there are two primary types of organizational defined parameters. The first is assignments. And these you'll see within some of the requirements. And basically, it's just an area where NIST is allowing you to define various different characteristics that were required to complete the requirement before it can be implemented. And the characteristic may be a condition, a specific type of event occurring, a frequency of something occurring. For example, the requirement for unsuccessful logons has a organization defined parameter in it that says the organization needs to specify how many unsuccessful logons need to occur before an action is taken. The other primary type of organization-defined parameter is selection. And in this case, NIST provides all of the options of what should be selected when completing the control, and you just need to pick one or more that is appropriate for your implementation. Okay. It's important to note that with the organizational defined parameters, NIST does not establish or assign the values for these ODPs. The values are selected for the security requirements by the federal agency that is requiring the requirement to be implemented. So basically, it's their data, it's their CUI that's being protected. So we need to understand how they want us to implement those protection capabilities. However, 171 Rev3 does go on to say that if the federal agency that's requiring 171 security requirements to be implemented has not defined values, it's the responsibility of the non-federal organization to identify what they feel is appropriate to protect that CUI data and then implement what they've defined. Okay, that was just a quick rundown of some of the most significant changes from Rev2 to Rev3 in 800-171. But I wanted to wrap up by saying that while the total number of requirements in Revision 3 has been reduced from 110 to 97, there really hasn't been a significant change to what organizations need to do to implement the capabilities as defined by the requirements. So the good news here is that if you're already implementing capabilities to address 171 Rev2 requirements, most of these capabilities and all of those capabilities will still need to be implemented to meet the security requirements in Rev3. And then finally, I've included a link to the SP 800-171 Rev3 profile template that was developed by Optic Cyber Solutions to help organizations get started in using 171 Rev3 by aligning their existing and target capabilities to the new Rev3 requirements. So I hope you've found this useful, and as you start digging into the updates, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you have any questions, or if there are other areas that you think we should dive deeper into. Thanks for watching.
Optic Cyber Solutions strives to help organizations identify and address their blind spots through our assessment, implementation, and advising services. For more information about Optic Cyber Solutions and our services, reach out at info@opticcyber.com or check out our website at opticcyber.com.